Hello everyone, Mike here. In today's video I wanted to take you behind the scenes and show you how exactly I make my backing tracks. I just wanted to take you guys through what my process is, show you a little bit of how I approach writing and ideation, stuff like that. I just focus on getting the basic idea down to start with. Usually it's a chord progression against a simple beat. And the philosophy here is simple. All I'm aiming to create with this track is a foundation for a melodic player to solo over. My tracks almost always start with a placeholder beat, using Superior Drummer 3 and a basic guitar idea. Once I've got my chord progression down, I'll usually double it up with a complementary part. That either means doubling the guitar, or adding a complementary sort of like piano part or an organ part, whatever. The next crucial element is the bass, and when it comes to the bass, until recently I was tracking it all myself live. Sometimes I still do, but in the name of saving time, these days I just use plugins. I use Murder Bass because it is a very natural sounding bass plugin, and I think you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference. Once I've got the basic framework down, I will start testing the vibe. And what that means is I will plug in my guitar, load up a patch in amplitude per turn, and I will do a quick solo test. If it passes, then I continue. If it doesn't, then maybe I'll revisit it later. So let's see if this one passes. Once I'm happy with the foundation, once the track has passed a vibe check, that's when I'll start fleshing things out further. So I'll start adding complementary instruments, and I'll start taking that basic drum beat from earlier, and I'll go in and add fills, humanize it, add ghost notes, all that stuff. So the kind of things that I flesh the production out with, I usually keep it to a minimum. I don't like too many elements. Usually what I'll add is stuff like keys or some organ, some synthesizers, Rhodes style keys, that's a common one to go to. We'll see which one I gravitate towards with this particular track. From there, it's usually about figuring out how to embellish the percussion, like I can add shakers, tambourines, bongos, whatever it might be. Really what I try to keep in mind is I just try to keep the piece evolving as it goes. I usually aim for about every 8 bars, change something. I have come across tracks in the niche where it is just blatantly a loop for 10 minutes and there's no variation, and to be honest, it hasn't harmed the views, but my producer instincts just cannot help but kick in. I just try to introduce a new element every 8 bars. And the last part of the process before I start exporting is I have to loop this track at some point, because most of the videos in the niche are about 8 minutes to 10 minutes or even longer. You know, guitarists want a bit of room to jam. They don't want to start a track and then 2 minutes later it'd be over. And it's not practical to make a track that's 10 minutes long and constantly varying throughout. So what I do is I'll aim for about 2 minutes to 3 minutes and loop it, maybe 2 to 3 cycles, well 3 to 4 actually maybe. And that usually brings me to about 6 minutes and above, and that's it. And from there I just make sure the loop points are clean and there's no weird artifacts, and then I start mixing. So when it comes to mixing, it's mostly just a case of setting levels. I do generally find I have to tame the bass a fair bit with compression, and I generally try to get the sounds right at the source though, so it's really minimal, the mixing that's required. And that's the way it should be, in my opinion. You should focus on choosing the right sounds at the source, and then the mix almost handles itself from that point. So when it comes to mastering, I've experimented with different levels since starting my channel, but the general rule of thumb now is I'll aim for about -11 LUFS. And there you have it. That's my entire process for creating a backing track from start to finish. The key thing really is I'm always aiming for a specific vibe, which is something that feels good to jam to. I try to maintain an emphasis on quality, but I also balance that with efficiency, because I'm putting out like 2 tracks a week. At some point you need to sort of like silence that voice in your head which is saying, oh, you just need to tweak that kick drum and like boost 80 Hz or whatever. It's really not something you can afford to be a perfectionist with, otherwise you can be sitting on tracks for weeks and not releasing anything. I hope this was a good insight into my process. I think it is cool to show how I work, and hopefully you can glean something interesting from this. I would be up for showing more of this process if it is of interest to people. I know that when I was starting out with making backing tracks, I would have loved tutorials to help me get going, because figuring it all out by myself has been a tedious process, and I would have much appreciated it if I had had someone point me in the right direction. So I'd be interested in showing more of my process. If you guys are interested, let me know. But for now, that's all for this one, and I will catch you in the next one. Cheers, see you later.